evening. Call to order the City of Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, March 28th, 2018. Mr. Sturch, if we have an introduction and a roll call, please.
Yes, for a roll call, I'd just like to introduce Karen Howard is our new Community Planning and Community Services Manager. She started a couple weeks ago. Karen came from Iowa City in the planning department down there, so I'd just like to introduce her to the commission.
Welcome. Glad to be on board.
Welcome.
Moving along to roll call. Atkins.
Here.
Arnston. Here. Jeruso.
Here.
Hartley.
Here.
Holst.
Here.
Leeper.
Here.
Oberly.
Here.
Saul.
Here.
Wingert.
Here.
Move on to approval of the minutes for our February 28th meeting, the last commission meeting. Is there any comments or corrections to the meeting minutes? If
Move
none,
we approve.
there's a motion to approve. There's a second. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Thank you. Our minutes are approved. At this point, we will open the floor for any general public comments. And seeing none, we'll move into our first item of old business is the Highway 1 District Site Plan Review for the Holiday Inn and Suites Conference Center. And Mr. Graham, if you would give us some background information on this, please.
Thank you. So the commission initially reviewed this back in February 14th for a site plan for a new Holiday Inn and Suites hotel and a 31,000 square foot convention center, which would be located on Lot 1 here of the Gateway Business Park at Cedar Falls Plat. If you remember, the commission recently reviewed the preliminary plat for this entire 46 acres, and the site plan for the hotel is on Lot 1. And then later on in this agenda, you'll see the final plat for this lot as well. So again, looking through some of the background, this property is zoned Highway 1 Commercial District, located near the corner of Ridgeway and Hudson Road. A hotel such as this and conference center is a permitted use in this zoning district. Again, kind of looking at the site plan, there hasn't been any changes to the actual site plan since the last time the commission reviewed it. Again, you have the hotel on the south side of the building with the conference center on the north side. Again, the entrance to the hotel is on the south side of the property there. And then there will be 4 entrances to the property, 2 off of Hudson Road, which would be right in, right out only, and then 2 full accesses on what would be New Cyber Lane on the east side. Again, they're showing room for a future hotel up at the north end of the property, and the conference center entrance is on the west side of the building. And again, there's a recreational trail shown along Hudson Road with a trail connection to the parking lot with room for bike racks. And again, the trash dumpster will be located inside of the building. Again, nothing has changed since the last month's meeting as far as that goes. Again, looking at some of the elements that we review when we look at site plans, looking at landscaping and open space, they are providing the correct amount of trees. They're looking at street trees, parking lot trees, perimeter points, and so it does meet the landscaping requirements and open space requirements. Again, they're kind of have a mix of trees along the perimeter of the parking lot and then a lot of smaller shrubs and other flowers and plants kind of along the perimeter of the building all around on each side. Looking at the signage plan, so the site plan they provided back in February showed a sign at all 4 locations, 4 entrances. The code for the signage plan shows that you can only have 3, and so they did remove one of the signs at the northeast entrance. So what this slide is showing is just showing arrows to the 3 entrances where those monument signs would be located. So they did eliminate the one at the northeast corner entrance there to come into compliance with the signage requirements. And then there's the one image here. They are going to have the branding of the hotel up on the main building itself. Again, that would appear to meet the size requirements for any wall signage as well. Looking at the stormwater management plan, everything is going to funnel to a detention basin at the north end of the property. You can kind of see here how that water is going to be routed. It's going to be routed through the parking lot and into piping under the parking lot, and then eventually get piped up to that detention basin at the north end of the property. So this is the building design. So this is looking from the south side. I know one of the comments at the commission meeting last month was that the image was a little bit hard to read, and so the applicant did try to give us some better images showing the exterior design. Again, they're showing the first level mainly with brick and stone, and then those second, third, and fourth levels mainly like two different colors of stucco. They're going with a gray color and a white color. I think the colors that the commission saw last month were more of like a tan, two types of tan. So they are changing the color scheme a little bit, going from those tan colors to more of a white and a gray color. And then again, this image is an image looking from, which would be the north side, which would be looking at the conference center side. Again, the conference center side is just the one story, and that will be mainly brick and stone, and then you can see the upper stories of the hotel kind of in the background on there. So from last month's meeting, they did make several changes to the building design. On the slide on the left is the previous design that the commission reviewed last month, and I'm circling two different things here. The first on the top being the top of the building where the Holiday Inn and Suites sign is. You can see it was kind of like a glass panel extended over the roof line. If you look at the image on the right, they are lowering that and then just putting a typical parapet wall above that. I believe they're doing that for cost purposes. So that's one change. And then the other change on that image on the left is circling the drive-up canopy. The previous picture shows more of a stone or rock pillars with more of like just a stucco type roof over it. They are going with a more modern design with the image on the right with more of the brick and stone again columns, and instead the roof canopy will be more of a metal and glass feature, so to try to give it a more modern appealing look. So those are the main two design changes from what the commission reviewed last month. So at this time, it would be staff's recommendation to approve the site plan. Obviously, would like the commission's thoughts on those exterior design changes. If there's any other comments or directions specified by the commission, and the applicant and their representatives, I think, are here if you have any questions on the site plan or the design.
We'll follow our standard presentation order and first invite the applicant for any presentation they would like to make. We'll open it up for any public comments and then give the applicant a chance to respond to any of those public comments and bring it back to the commission for discussion. So if the applicant is here and would like to address the commission, add anything to the staff's presentation? Are there any public comments, public questions on this item? Commission? Questions for staff or for the applicant? Discussion?
I like the change in color. I think it's very contemporary and modern. It's good to see something other than brown. And I do like the canopy change. I loved the glass extending above on the old design, but I do understand costs, so I do like the changes.
Shane, just a question on some of the roads. Obviously, they're going to want to have a building with right-in only, so the Cyber Lane piece, will that be completed all the way to Ridgeway at the point in time this facility opens, or is there going to be a phase-in of the roadway construction there? So from the backside?
Right, so by the time the hotel opens, it will be fully in. Cyber Lane will be in from Technology Parkway all the way to Ridgeway Avenue.
Okay.
I think they're going to stage some of the construction to begin with. They want to get the road down from Technology Parkway to the hotel site so they can get construction equipment in.
Sure.
By the time the actual hotel is ready for opening and occupancy, the full road would be open all the way to Ridgeway.
All right, very good.
It's pretty straightforward. I would move that we approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Please go ahead and vote. We have all ayes on that item. So the item is approved and recommend approval and forward on to the City Council. Our second item of old business is zoning ordinance amendments, and Mr. Sturch, if you would give us the background on this item, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Oberly. last January, it made some introductions to possible zoning changes in the zoning ordinance for uses, mixed uses in C3 district as well as the College Hill Overlay District. And since then, we've kind of looked at some other cities and towns and those ordinances, and met with Community Main Street and got some feedback from them and the College Hill Partnership. And then, if you remember, there was kind of 3 ideas to go off of describing the use of that building. So basically, kind of, I want to go over some of those ideas with new mixed-use buildings, starting with definitions. And we want to add new definitions for efficiency in a studio unit, and also with the idea of what a mixed-use building is. So efficiency studio unit is basically occupancy for small space, 600 square foot, typically one large area. You might have separate closets and bathrooms in that area. So it's really kind of a one big room with a kitchen and bedroom that share that. So we want to add that, introduce that into the zoning ordinance, along with actually mixed-use building, which is defined as that single building containing more than one type of land use. So you're looking at commercial, it'd be retail, office, and then that type of residential development. Moving along with the C3 district, there are 2 C3 districts in the city. It's downtown in the College Hill area. And then we got those overlays for the downtown and College Hill area. So we're looking at kind of defining that mixed use with residential dwellings on the upper floors of those buildings, and this is in the structure. And then ground level is defined or primarily used for commercial uses. So we want to look at the street level commercial space, make sure that occupies that ground level since it is a C3 district. And then parking behind that commercial space. So we want to make sure that storefront continues along the sidewalk for pedestrian scale, and make sure there's no breakups. The parking is in behind. There may be some cases that you might have a driveway in between the building if it's not a corner lot, so you'd have access on one side of the building to get to that parking lots. But for the most part, that commercial space is carried through along that sidewalk area. On-site parking will be required for all residential uses. And then time to time, P&Z may consider some off-site parking arrangements, nearby off-site parking arrangements. There may be commercial use that might have excess amount of stalls that are willing to, give away, or not give away, but lease a couple spaces for those uses. And so we'd want to look at location, shared use parking in those areas. Of course, there would have to be some agreements, because that would have to carry with the use of that building and wherever those stalls are located. So we'd want to look at maybe some nearby off-premise parking lots for these type of uses to make sure they get those parking considerations for the number of units and occupants in the residential area. We did kind of introduce or got some feedback on some exceptions, and those would be kind of, you got an existing commercial building, there's some upper floor space that I might want to look at. So the parking would be, those parking requirements would not apply to the existing buildings in the C3 district. If there are already residential uses on those upper floors, and for some reason those uses might be damaged, substantially damaged, that use can go back and be rebuilt or remodeled. And then any new mixed-use building with 3 or fewer upper floor residential dwellings would not require parking and not exceed a total of 6 bedrooms. So these are ideas we want to get some feedback from the commission and the public. Moving along with, again, when we look at adding definitions, so the efficiency studio units, looking at adding that into the parking section, which is 1 stall per efficiency and studio unit. So just moving along here, the next meeting, we'd like to schedule a public hearing and continue the discussion at Planning and Zoning Commission on April 11th. That's my presentation. If you have any questions. I do want to add that commission member did receive some comments today from the public, so we want to get those comments and introduce those as part of the record and get those out to everybody else. So if those comments come in, make sure we know about that so we can include that in the packet of information for everybody to see.
With that, we'll open it up. Is there public comment or questions on this item? If so, please come up, approach the microphone, state your name and address.
Hi, Ishan Vajpayee, 3831 Conduit Lane, Cedar Falls, Iowa. Here on behalf of myself and my client, Brian Sires. I did submit some comments that hopefully will be making their way to you. Not going to try and rehash all of those, but just talk about them. And I know that this isn't really a time for voting or necessarily a solid recommendation, but just want to get the juices flowing here. It's my client's position and my thought that these changes appear to be being proposed to allow certain types of developments and certain developments that have so far failed to meet the ordinances. They are changes that are not necessary to develop residential properties in these districts. Residential properties can already be developed in these districts as shown by the many developments that have already been built. They simply have to be built within the current ordinance rules regarding parking, setbacks, lot area, things like that. These appear to be changes proposed in order to exempt out or crack the door for the last few developments in some of these zoning areas for the last few developers who are wishing to build. Specifically, I think it's no mystery that 2119 College, an extremely controversial development, will benefit greatly from these ordinance changes, and I posit this is no coincidence. The site plans should conform to the code. The code shouldn't conform to meet a site plan. As I said, residential development is allowed in these areas. Residential development is possible in these areas. I feel like we've heard at council and in this chamber the idea that we have to do this to allow this development. Well, you might have to do this to allow the site plan that particular developers want, but that doesn't mean that they can't develop a commercial space, residential floors above it within the current ordinance. Specifically, I know that certain developments coming forward are going to contain large amounts of studio apartments, efficiency units. The proposed parking change would make that one stall for that unit. But there's no functional difference between a studio apartment and a one-bedroom apartment. We're talking about one bed, presumably, in a studio, one bed in a one-bedroom, same number of people in a studio, same number of people in a one-bedroom. But unless this studio parking requirement is extended to the one-bedrooms, that studio would only need one spot, but the one bedroom would need two spots. So, as I read it, now I invite people to prove me wrong constantly, but the way the studio efficiency is carved out here, it would apply just to those studio apartments, and that just seems slightly arbitrary. Same people, same beds, fewer spots. Again, certain developments are being proposed with upwards of 50, 55 studio apartments, and this certainly benefits them greatly. So just want to get the juices flowing on that. And also, I know this is possibly premature, and I always feel conflicted about raising this, but I have submitted previously information to the Planning and Zoning Committee in the city about Mr. Wingert's involvement in any decision or consideration regarding anything that could directly or indirectly benefit Brent Dahlstrom because of their significant business relationship involving Panther Farms LLC and Panther Builders LLC. You may have the information already that I submitted, but it involves a development company for single-family homes, land holding company where these men are signed on mortgages totaling the millions and millions of dollars. And I know that Mr. Wingert has previously stated he has no part in this particular College Street development, But as pointed out in the letter, he has been called upon to sell condo units in other multifamily residential buildings owned by Mr. Dahlstrom as a Realtor, and we don't know that that's not going to happen here. And I think given, even though that site plan is not up for consideration today, I think given the proximity of that site plan to some of these ordinance change suggestions, I think that his recusal on that site plan should flow into these just because of that incredibly close relationship that we believe does not allow him to be impartial. Thank you.
Additional comments on the ordinance, proposed ordinance changes?
Hi there, Ryan Creener, 4525 Quesada Court in Cedar Falls. Just wanted to touch base with College Hill Partnership and their mission statement. In their mission statement, it talks about urbanization and revitalization. And restricting developers will start to restrict that entire mission that partnership believes in. The area of a 3-block radius about is promoted for high density. We start limiting some of this area, we're kind of going against the entire belief of that area. There's good things happen on the Hill. I would hate to see that the momentum and the ball stops because of all this stuff. That's all I got. Thank you.
Dr. Brian Sires. I promised myself I wouldn't come tonight, but I did have just one thing that I'd like to talk about. I've had apartments kind of for a hobby for 20 years, and I've owned 300 or more, and I'm down to about 100. I've owned as many as 165. So I've had apartments of all different kinds of types. I've had studios, small one-bedrooms that were smaller than studios, larger one-bedrooms that were almost as big as 2 bedrooms, big mixture. And what I've found over the years is that people choose kind of a location and then they look for a price point. And so when, for instance, college students come to University Manor, they're often couples, and they rent depending on what the price point is and what they financially are able to purchase. So we lease the studios at nearly the price point of the one-bedrooms, but couples go into the studios or efficiencies at about the same rate they go into the one-bedrooms. They choose the one-bedrooms, again, according to what they can afford. But I guess the point I'm making is that there will be a couple in a studio as commonly as there will be a couple in a one-bedroom. And that's really the clientele you're looking at. The one-bedrooms, the real difference between a one-bedroom and a studio is really just a wall that separates a bedroom from a living room area. Because the kitchens can be here or there, but that's the main thing that does it. And so they can tolerate either type just fine, and they come into both sizes. The studios can be made into one-bedrooms by some landlords. I don't do it, but they put a divider across the living space, and then they call it a one-bedroom, and they raise the rate a little bit. And so effectively, these are almost interchangeable in a way. And I guess the point I'd make is that these kids coming in, they have a high rate of car use. I mean, we did check the large complexes close to mine, and they had a 98% car rate use. And I knew that was going to be about the case because I've owned the place 10 years. There's over 100 students or other people there, and usually only 2 to 4 might not have cars. So I knew that it was high. So the thing I'm saying is, I know there's going to be more development in the area around the College Hill. There are already people buying up land, large developers, and they'll put studios in. And if you don't make them have the parking of 2 cars, you'll underpark them by 40 or 50%. And as these older buildings turn over, you're going to get more of a problem. And I see it happening downtown, although I don't know as much about downtown. But everybody I talk to says parking downtown is going to be a problem. And I know that this particular ordinance change is going to affect both areas. And I would just caution you that the cities that have tried underparking apartments have run into severe problems at times, and they end up having to lean on the taxpayer to bail out the parking situation with expensive parking structures. So that was my only comment for tonight, is that what I've seen, what my experience is that two couples, or a couple often will take a studio just as much as they will a one-bedroom. Thanks.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll bring it to commission for additional questions of staff.
Let's clarify, the overall parking requirements then under this proposal would be, isn't it one parking stall per bedroom? So one bedroom gets one parking stall, or requires
No, it's
one?
just studio. Just, if it's a studio or efficiency unit, we're introducing that and adding that for one stall, yeah.
So what a one bedroom requires,
One bedroom will require two, since they're typically larger, they're separate rooms.
okay? And a two bedroom requires what then?
Two bedroom would be two,
So a one bedroom and a two bedroom are requiring the same number of parking stalls.
exactly. You can have a two bedroom apartment and have 4 people living there, but only require
That's different than what
stalls.
so that parking requirement is different than what's required for a residential house? Because that's it's by the bedroom, right? The number of stalls
Yeah,
required?
typically use the bedroom count as the parking, the off-street parking.
So if you have a one bedroom house, you'd only be required to have a one,
One bedroom house, it's a single unit, so it's 2 stalls.
okay, it's still 2 stalls on that, okay. I didn't remember that part.
And a two-bedroom house requires how many?
2.
2, 3,
So it's the
3,
same.
4, 4, yeah. Yes, it's,
How did you come up with the 600 square feet as this maximum size for the?
just searching other communities, sizes, looking at definitions, looking at past projects we looked at, and those typically range from 400 to 570. You know, that's come before the commission for those studio units.
Yeah, because at 600 square feet, I mean, you can have a one bedroom apartment too. I mean, obviously like a 400 square foot efficiency would not be big enough to be a one bedroom apartment. There wouldn't be enough room to have 2 separate rooms. But you do get into the 600 square feet, you could have, and you can have, there's a lot in that size range. So you kind of, at some point there, you have enough square footage to have one bedroom in the same space. So I don't know if that's magic number, if that's the magic number or what it should be. But
It's a number to start
Yeah,
with, you know,
right.
you can look at 400, 600, you don't want to go anything bigger than that. 'Cause
right, I don't think you want to go. Yeah, you're right, because I mean, 800 square feet, you can make a 2 bedroom for that. So all of a sudden you get quite a few potential people in there.
David, can you speak to staff's determination of the one stall for the studio,
Yeah.
information that went into that decision?
Again, just looking at other communities and how they apply their parking ratios. Some look at half a stalls and 1.5 stalls. So again, just kind of the idea of the studio units, efficiency units are, they could be occupied by a couple, maybe just with one vehicle. Right. Just kind of looking in the future of how these developments will come in. Again, work at home type of thing, pedestrian, mixed use, that type of thing. You live downtown, you work downtown, so you might just have a car, or may not have a car. You might have a couple bikes. So just more on that.
Well, it's almost like, well, yeah, the studio might be a little bit low because you might have more than 1-to-1, but then kind of look at the one bedroom and say, well, 2. That almost seems a little bit high because it's like, you're going to have some that are going to be one person, so do you really need 2 for every one bedroom, But that's just That's just anecdotal, I guess. But
My concern is that you could have 3 people in that studio,
yeah,
technically. And we're changing the definition of mixed-use building, and we're changing the definition of efficiency, or we're adding it in.
We're adding.
Adding it in.
Yeah.
And I may not care about what happens on the Hill, but I do care about what happens in the downtown overlay district. I don't mean I don't care about what happens on the Hill, but you know what I'm saying?
I do, I live real close, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying is, and then we say that we're not going to, for new mixed-use buildings with 3 or fewer upper floor residentials, which could have 6 bedrooms, where that's an exception, we're not gonna ask them to park those 6 bedrooms? Is that what it says?
That's part of the exception
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. So that's potentially, if you have 6 bedrooms, that's 12 people parking possibly, right?
Potentially.
If they share bedrooms. You know,
Well,
you look at existing sites, let's say downtown, you have a lot size that's so big.
Right.
There's only a certain amount of units you can put on the upper floor based on sizes and common areas, hallways, you know, 2 access points in it. So it really kind of limits how many units you can put in that space. And when you're looking at commercial, you can build to the lot line, but then you go up and then what do you do on that second floor? So you know, that's kind of the idea on using existing space, you know, reconstructing existing space and then adding new on that exception side.
Do you have an idea of what this new mixed-use building would look like that you just described? I mean, there's really no vision of, okay, this is what we want it to look like, this is what we want it to accomplish. I just think it would help if there was an idea of what this new mixed building would look like, where it might fit in, where it would go. You know, I think the vision of the local developers is so critical to these projects that if we're not talking to them, I think it's almost a disservice because they're the ones that know our community better than anybody. We can look at Champaign as much as we want, or we can look at Fayetteville or wherever it is. But, I mean, that's not Cedar Falls, whether it's an overlay in downtown or the Hill. I think the developers that are actually doing this, although it's not necessarily to have them steer you towards what's going to work for their development, I think it's critical for them to see their vision of our town and at least think about it and talk about it in which direction we go. And Dr. Sires has got a vision for it, and we've got a vision for it, and City Council has a different vision for it. It seems like there's 100 different visions for where this is going to go, and there's a couple different routes that I think could be at least expanded upon as far as who we're talking to and what kind of vision we've got.
Well, I think staff realizes that, again, using that main floor, street level floor is commercial use. So the developer will dictate the depth of that storefront and what type of use they want to go. So if it's, I think we're kind of open to that is, hey, well, let's do a minimum depth. Let's say it's 40 feet or so, 30 or 40 feet. That's good for a little shop, but if you want to go deeper for a restaurant, you know, that's up to the developer, then anything behind that would be parking. So I think that's the idea is really establish that base, what the commercial use is and how deep you want to go. I don't think we're going to really restrict that. It's just how many stories you're going to go and where's that parking going to be at.
Yeah, so what you're saying in this new ordinance is commercial only on the main floor.
Yeah, it's a commercial district, so we want to preserve that commercial space.
Yeah, which I think, I mean, I'm good with that. I think to me, that's a minimum. You know, they're not big commercial zones anyways. You know, and every time commercial tries to go anywhere else in the city, you know, there's somebody there complaining. I mean, you know, nobody wants commercial in their backyard anywhere, you know, so you know, we need to encourage the commercial use, and I think, you know, previously, for many years, it was like, you know, wasn't encouraged to even put residential in the commercial, you know, in the C3, because it's, you know, we don't have much commercial space, and so I think whatever we do has got to be tilted towards the commercial to, you know, encourage that at the very least, because, you know, you could have a 5-story commercial building, you don't require any parking, you get a lot of offices or whatever it is on the second floor. I mean, that's a good use. So, you know, maintaining that, I think, is important, which I guess these changes don't affect that any, right?
In the C3 district, the commercial is not parked. So if you're looking at a mixed use in a C2 or C1 or MU, or the full use is parked. So really, it's trying to clean up that, you know, those
Right.
issues in the C3 that don't have that parking requirement.
Right.
I guess I would take exception with the accusation that this group is playing favoritism to a particular person or group. I believe this group is trying to deal with the density issues that our community is facing in an open process, which is what we're doing here. So I don't think that's accurate, one. Second, what I'm hearing really from Dr. Sayers is that there needs to be equity between some of the developments that we're talking about here and some of the single family or the houses, right, in terms of what those requirements are. So I would ask staff to evaluate whether there is some equity there. I know they're different.
The parking
Yes.
side of it?
Yes, exactly. And lastly, I guess I'd like some clarification. There was one clause about 3 floors and 6 beds. Okay, can I see that again?
3 units.
3 units?
3 or fewer units on the upper floor, or a total of 6 bedrooms. So that's part of the exception rule
Okay.
proposed.
Yeah, so there's really kind of 2 parts to it. If it's new, you can have up to 3 units and 6 bedrooms without parking it.
That's how it reads.
Yeah, or if you have an existing condition, or an existing building, then with residential, you can maintain that regardless.
Yes, that maintained.
Yeah. But if you have an existing 4-story, not that maybe we don't have this 4-story building or something, if you converted some of that to residential, you would get the parking requirement then?
Well, you take an existing building in the C3 district, and let's say an upper floor is vacant, you want to convert that to residential units, that would be exempt.
Okay.
That's how it's written here.
Right,
And
right.
we can expand on that a little bit more, but
We don't have a lot of building stock though that would, I mean, we don't have well, other than, I guess, 4th and Main downtown, but most of them are 2-story.
2 stories.
2-story, some 3-story.
And then there's that vacant lot there in the corner, 4th and Main, and how that,
But that would fall into the 3 units and 6 bedroom clause, because that would be a new structure, something built there.
you know, and person can take those, I believe it's 2 lots, it's a pretty wide lot, so you'd have commercial on the main floor, and maybe you have some tuck under parking, you know, off the alley, so there's
Or the one
options.
on 4th and
Look at that for.
4th and Main corner.
Yeah, on the northeast side.
Yeah, there's not enough room for parking under there.
Well,
Or
you
you
take
look
the back building out and.
It's basically 3 old storefronts, yeah. I looked at that a long time ago.
So those requirements the same if I own a city block or if I own 1 lot? The 3 units, 6 beds?
For new development? Correct. But you can assemble those blocks and those lots and put something together for some frontage, storefronts, and then parking in behind. And that's kind of what it really takes, is taking a number of lots and merging them together and then doing some sort of a project.
Well,
A lot of these lots downtown are 50 feet wide. I mean, I can get much out of it.
does this create a back doorway, though? If you get 3 units per 1 development, the guy's got a big piece of land, does he start dividing it into separate properties and then building all in a row and get 3 in,
Yes,
with
and
6 in
look-
each one of them, you know.
You know, it's a
Sorry.
trickle effect.
I don't know if that,
I don't know that I have a clarification on that. Stephanie Sheets, Director of Community Development, but I wanted to get back to the equity question and see if we could answer that a bit. Now, this proposal does include in the C3 district, we have areas where residential is not required to park, and this proposal would enact a requirement that there be parking. So I don't know if that addresses your question about equity or not. I mean, citywide, the 2 spaces per unit is what we have in place right now. And so we're talking about in lower occupancy unit, like an efficiency, is that really necessary? And then, so that's a citywide change that would happen to an efficiency anywhere in
Anywhere in
town,
the
not
city.
just in the C3.
Okay.
And then also then pointing out again that right now, there's not a requirement for that upper level parking, and we would be proposing to enact that. I don't know if that helps answer that question.
So something that goes along with that, I know that if you exclude the commercial part of this and just say it's just a building and you have people living in it, and then the first floor, okay, we'll just say it's there. How different is that now than R4? You know, when we get into those other kind of categories in the city, how different would the upper levels of a building be than R4? Would it, sounds like it becomes
In the other zoning, parking is required.
Yeah, so it really becomes more the same than it is different.
Yes, it kind of brings that all
I think
together.
that's a really important point,
except for
the exceptions.
Well, no, except for an R4, you got to have setbacks that you don't have to
Well,
have in
okay,
in
but
C3, which
outside of
is a
the-
big deal, you know, I mean, in terms of getting your density and all that type of thing.
If you're living in it, I guess if there's, okay, so if you're
Yeah, no, as far as functionally,
functional thing, I guess is the question. It really becomes an R4 thing with a commercial piece added on. It's kind of what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, you can have an office use in an R4, so that would introduce that zoning. But then you'd have to park the office and residential.
Okay. Okay.
Are there any current buildings in Cedar Falls that would fit this new, in these C3 zones right now? Are they any, do you know, that would fit the new criteria? And that's what I'm looking for is, can we look at a building that would fit this criteria and see what it is?
200 West First was one. River Place development was set up as a, I think it was a 6-acre site, and that started a few years back. As part of the zoning agreement, it was stated that you have to park the residential.
Okay.
So it kind of started with that, and then we kind of carried that through with Sidecar up on the hill. I believe there was a couple of units up there that didn't require parking, but the owner added some stalls in the back off the alley and next to the a municipal lot behind there. And then the Domino's there's a couple units above the Domino's there down on 22nd.
Perfect.
yeah.
Tied to that 8-unit complex behind that, there was kind of some shared parking for those tenants.
So this would be very consistent with what we've been essentially requiring
Yeah.
on everything else so far.
So it's really, my take is it's really not promoting a ton of density. It's almost discouraging a lot of density, and am I right on that?
Well, it depends. If you're putting a lot of residential in, you're not going to get as much density because of the parking, but if you're putting all commercial in, yeah, you can get,
But nobody's gonna put all commercial in College Hill District.
But there's flexibility to deal with the parking
Sure, okay.
in different ways,
Yeah.
which I like.
yeah.
Okay.
Any other feedback for staff?
I just want to put on the record that it was our representation's opinion that I had no reason to abstain in this project, and I just wanted to make that clear.
So this item then, we will set the date for public hearing of April 11th.
Send a notice to the Courier so that can be in the newspaper next Wednesday, because it's a week ahead of time for that April 11th meeting.
And we'll note as a public hearing on an ordinance change, we of course invite all of the public to please come and give input. That's the time for developer input, residential, landlord, everyone involved to please come and understand the changes that are being proposed and ask questions and give your input.
So, and then we have all our homework here to study up on parking for that public hearing, is that
Got homework.
That concludes our old business items. We'll move on to new business. Our first item is the Greenhill Village Townhomes Master Plan Amendment. And Ms. Lehman, if you would introduce this item, please.
I want to start off saying I'm going to abstain on this project.
Thank you. So Panther Farms LLC is proposing to amend the northwestmost section of the Greenhill Village Master Plan. The Greenhill Village Master Plan, or really the Greenhill Village area, is located southeast of Greenhill and Hudson Road. So they're kind of indicated by the star, this specific section of the master plan or Greenhill Village area that's being looked at or considered today. So the applicant is proposing to amend the master plan to allow higher density residential to be developed in this specific section, specifically townhomes. The amendment for increased density is seen as a significant improvement, so it does trigger planning and zoning and city council review and approval. So that is why it's in front of you here today. So this image on this slide shows the last approved master plan for the Greenhill Village, and which was a result of the area being rezoned to MU, mixed use, back in 1998. MU zoning, mixed-use zoning, has the intent to encourage a variety of home types and neighborhood commercial uses. The area in question, outlined here in green, was originally designated for single-unit home residential development. The applicant is requesting to amend the plan to allow for a multi-unit townhome residential development in this area. The increase in density, as I noted before, is seen as a substantial improvement and does require review. And then just for your reference, notices have been sent out to neighbors, so they are aware of the request in front of us here tonight. Since the approval of the master plan in 2003, 3 areas have since developed at lower densities than what were originally shown on the master plan. These 3 areas, I'm going to indicate to them on the map here with the mouse, are in orange, and the first one was originally proposed to be part of a office commercial part of the development, but is now multi-unit residential. This area here to the east, was originally proposed to be a 2-unit patio homes, but since has been developed as single-family residential. The area here to the south, also highlighted here in orange, was supposed to be part of a condominium development, or that's how it was proposed, and has since been developed as a single-family residential development. So in general, all areas, there has been a decrease in density of the overall Greenhill Village Master Plan over time. Again, the intent of the MU zoning district is to allow and encourage diversity of uses and home types. An increase in density in this location would follow the intent of the zoning district of mixed use. The city's future land use map was created to be our community's visual guide to future planning and development. Here is an excerpt of that map, kind of showing the area in question. Generally, it's a standard planning practice for single-unit homes to be buffered from commercial uses with higher or mid-range residential density to create kind of a general transition from the different uses. The City Future's land use map closely follows the Greenhill Village Master Plan and does show that transition. So here, flowing from low-density residential to medium-density residential to your commercial and mixed-use area there to the north. The area being considered, shown here with the star, does fall within the area for medium-density residential. So it does follow the proposed future land use map of the city. Part of a master plan amendment is a concept plan for the area. This is what has been submitted for this amendment request. The concept plan will be used as a guide for the type of multifamily development permitted in this area. And then just noting here for clarity, a full site plan review as well as a facade review will be required at a future date before any development can happen in this area. So we are not approving this particular site plan at this time. It's more or less approving the master plan amendment to allow for this type of development to be proposed at this location. So that's what's in front of us today, not this specific site plan. That said, the proposed concept plan and density level of townhomes is consistent in scale with neighboring homes and in keeping with the single unit character of the neighborhood in terms of height and spacing. The garages will be located to the rear, creating a more pedestrian-oriented residential character. So these are things that we would hold or look at when an actual site plan would be submitted to make sure that it complements the neighboring residential areas. So again, MU zoning, mixed-use zoning, encourages a mixture of uses and housing types. As the areas have been developed in the Greenhill Village Master Plan at lower densities than what was originally designated, and the future land use map shows medium residential being in this area, staff is supportive of the proposed change at this location. And then just a note, Steve Trosky with CGA is here as a representative from the applicant in case there are any questions from the commission.
The applicant, Mr. Trosky, like to speak to the commission or any items to add? Seeing none, anyone from the public, any comments, questions? Commission, questions for applicant or staff?
So that, if I got this right, all the property to the north is commercial right now, right? And then you've got single-family residential on the east and the south. And they've all been notified, but you haven't heard anything from them?
That's correct, yes.
So, to me, it makes sense as a transition from the single family to the commercial anyways, but that's...
Yeah, it also seems logical to me. I think it'd be nice to see, what they really are. That matters.
Yeah.
So
But conceptually.
Yeah, conceptually, I think the density makes sense.
And to your point, I mean, there was a lot more density planned originally, and everybody's building single-family homes, like. I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. I'd make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and vote. One abstention and the rest ayes. That is approved by the commission, and we'll recommend approval and forward that on to the city council. Our next item of new business is the Gateway Business Park at Cedar Falls, one final plat. And Mr. Graham, please introduce this item for us.
Thank you. Again, we're back here at near the corner of West Ridgeway Avenue and Hudson Road. Again, earlier on the agenda was the site plan, which was on Lot 1. And last month, the commission reviewed the preliminary plat for the entire 46 acres. What this is for only 2 lots. The preliminary plat was originally 6 lots on 46 acres. This is looking at just 2 lots on about 17 acres, which does also include, again, Cyber Lane, and that was a question Brian had earlier. So you can see in the final plat here, this is including all of Cyber Lane down to Ridgeway. Again, 2 lots. Lot 1, again, was where the Holiday Inn Hotel will go, and then Lot 2 currently doesn't have any reserved use. Again, it's zoned Highway 1, so any use on Lot 2 would have to come back through the commission and council for any site plan for that lot. Again, on this plat, there's 2 tracts, Tract B and Tract C. Those are stormwater detention basins that will capture stormwater from Lot 1 and Lot 2 and some areas off the site. And then again, they're showing the recreational trail easement along Hudson Road, which would be for that recreation trail. Again, I wanted to just show this image. Again, this is what the commission reviewed last month, was the preliminary plat for all 6 lots. Again, this is just the final plat for Lot 1, Lot 2, and then Cyber Lane, which they plan on constructing at this time, and then they will phase and do the other lots at a further time, and they'll come through with final plats on that in the future. In the staff report, there's an issue that talked about tracks B and C being updated. In the original final plat they submitted, those weren't shown as their own lots. They were kind of just shown as described areas within lots 1 and lot 2. So in the staff report, we indicated that we wanted to see an updated final plat that showed those parceled off, and also some changes to the deed of dedication to reflect that. They did provide those already, so in the recommendation here on the screen, I don't have that caveat as part of our recommendation, because they did provide the updated plat showing those tracks as their own lots, and they did provide the updated wording to the deed of dedication so that it is acceptable to the city as far as both of those concerns are. So staff would recommend approval of the final plat without any of the other stipulations attached.
Thank you. The applicant wish to address this item at all? Any public comments? Commission comments?
You can make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Please go ahead and register your votes. We have all ayes on that one. The commission has approved that and will recommend approval for the city council. Our last item of new business is the Western Home Communities 8th edition preliminary and final plat, and Mr. Sturch.
Thank you, Mrs. Oberly. Yeah, I want to introduce the preliminary and final plat for the Western Home Communities 8th edition. This is located in the Western Home South Main Street campus on Hyacinth and Caraway Lane. This basically includes the new building that was going up or recently constructed for the Jorgensen Plaza Center. What did I do? You just kind of give a little history on this platted area down on along Prairie Parkway. In 2015, the Western Home Communities 7th edition was approved, and Lot 17 was the large lot there along Hyacinth again, 22-acre lot. And then moving in 2016, there was a minor plat for that Lot 17 that created these two parcels, F and G. One was for an existing building there on G, and then F included the Jorgensen Plaza and Skilled Nursing Center on that area. So then now that's what brings us here today is Western Home would like to split those three uses up, which is the Jorgensen Plaza, the common area in the middle, the skilled nursing unit on the north side, and then on the south side is more of an independent living facility. It is one building, but they want to split those uses up for tax purposes. And as you can kind of see on the preliminary plat is kind of got a lot of information on that. It shows existing details with the parking lot and the building. And then I just added that site plan that Planning and Zoning Commission looked at a few years ago on that building. It kind of separates those uses. So basically in the preliminary plat, you know, as part of the staff report, we had some comments on Lot 1, which is on the south side. It didn't touch any street frontage. So that has been reviewed and changed, resubmitted. So it does have a little finger up there on Hyacinth Drive that provides that street frontage. And then across all lots, there are reciprocal easements for access and parking, so it's going to be a shared parking arrangement for those three lots. So those kind of covers those parking areas on the east and west side of the building. The preliminary plat conforms to the ordinance requirements. And then moving along with the final plat, it's the same thing. It's just kind of cleaning up some of those underlying elements. And again, it conforms to all those platting requirements. The easements are cross-access easements. So we want to run these two plats together, preliminary and final. Since they already minor platted this, they can't minor plat a minor plat. So that calls for the preliminary and final to create these three lots. There's no public improvements per se involved in this. It was handled when we did the 7th edition. So we want to move this ahead to council and recommend approval for the preliminary and final plat.
Any applicant comments on this item? And any comments or questions from the public?
I want to note that I have a conflict of interest on this item, so I'll be abstaining.
Thank you. Commission?
Curiosity more than anything, but what these lots rely on each other, right, for parking and other things. So you couldn't sell one of these lots off and.
That easement covers all the three lots, so those easements would stay in place.
Right.
So if you want to sell the south building, it still would be shared access for parking and cross and driveways to the other two lots.
Motion to approve?
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please register your votes.
I don't think it cleared. Clear.
It's slow.
All right.
We have one abstention and the rest ayes on that item also, so the commission has approved. We'll recommend approval to City Council. That concludes our business items. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor of adjournment signify with aye.
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 Opposed?
Got that second.
Thank you. We are adjourned.